Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human research and written material.
Right, so we are jumping into something pretty heavy today.
Yeah, we really are. But, okay, I want you to imagine, just for a second, that the absolute worst has happened.
Okay.
Like, your house has just burned to the ground.
Oh, man.
Right, you've lost everything. The roof has collapsed. The walls are just gone.
Totally devastation.
Exactly. The photo albums, the family heirlooms, your computer drives.
All the backups.
All the backups, yeah. All of it is just turned to ash. And you are standing in the smoldering ruin of what used to be your life, just, digging through the rubble.
Yeah?
And suddenly you find this small, fireproof metal box.
Okay, I'm with you.
So you pry it open, and inside there's just a stack of charred, ancient family records. Like literally just a list of names on singed paper. Now, if a stranger was walking by on the street, that document is completely meaningless to them.
Right, it's just old data to them.
Exactly, just old data. But to you, standing in those ashes, that piece of paper is a survival document.
Because it proves who you are.
Yes. It proves you have a history, that you belong to a line that existed before the fire happened.
Yeah, that you have a foundation you can actually rebuild on.
Exactly. And so today, in our deep dive, we are basically opening up a fireproof box from ancient history.
We really are. And it's a dense one.
It is so dense. We are looking at a text that, on its surface, might seem like the most intimidating, maybe even tedious reading imaginable.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about the first 9 chapters of First Chronicles.
Yeah.
Which is literally 9 chapters of an ancient phone book.
That's the best way to describe it. It's just a massive list.
It just starts with, Adam, Seth, Enosh, and it just keeps going. Thousands of names.
Just a towering wall of text.
A towering wall of text. And
Right.
It is so easy to take one look at this and just completely check out.
Oh, yeah, most people do. I mean, who wants to read 9 chapters of names they can't pronounce?
Right. But when you realize that this is actually a survival document written by people who are literally standing in the ashes of their civilization, it completely changes the lens.
It really does. The fireproof box analogy is the exact right framework here because it forces us to look at the historical timeline.
Yeah, set the stage for us. What's the context?
Well, we really have to understand the geopolitical reality these chapters were born into, right?
Okay.
So this text was compiled around 400 BC, and the original audience had just returned from the Babylonian captivity.
Right. Which was brutal.
Unbelievably brutal. I mean, for 70 years, the Israelites had been exiles. They were completely stripped of their national identity.
Wow. 70 years. That's like multiple generations.
Exactly. The Babylonian Empire didn't just conquer them, they systematically dismantled their entire world.
They took everything.
Everything. They lost the temple in Jerusalem, which you have to remember wasn't just like a church to them.
Right. It wasn't just a place you go on weekends.
No, it was the literal physical epicenter of their cosmos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they lost their king, they lost their ancestral homes, their autonomy, all of it.
So they're coming back to literally nothing?
They are a broken people returning to a ruined city, standing in literal rubble, trying to figure out if they even exist as a distinct people anymore.
They're facing a total crisis of identity.
Absolutely.
But, okay, here's my question. If you are trying to rebuild a ruined city, why is a giant list of names the very first thing you write down?
It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah. It seems like a massive waste of parchment. I mean, don't you need architectural plans? Or like a new legal code? Are they just being nostalgic?
See, that's the thing. It wasn't nostalgia at all. It was actually the fundamental mechanism of their society.
What do you mean?
Well, in the ancient Near East, a genealogy wasn't just a fun family tree you look up on the internet. It functioned as the ultimate legal and civic infrastructure.
Really?
Yeah. First of all, it was the basis of property law.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Right, because according to the ancient codes, the ones established way back in the days of Joshua, the land of Canaan had been divided permanently by tribe, clan, and family.
So it was all mapped out.
Precisely. So if you wanted to claim your ancestral farm or your vineyard after being exiled in Babylon for 3 generations.
You couldn't just point to an empty plot of land and be like, oh yeah, my grandfather used to live right here.
Exactly. You couldn't just claim it. You had to legally prove your lineage, tracing back to the original tribal allotments.
Wow. So if you don't have your name on the list, you don't get your land.
You're homeless, period. And second, and perhaps even more critically, it was about the priesthood.
Ah, the Levites.
The Levites, yeah.
Yeah.
The priests and the Levites were essentially the civic, health, and spiritual administrators of the whole nation.
They ran everything.
They did. They were judges, they were health inspectors, they maintained the calendar.
Wait, health inspectors?
Oh, yeah, they had to diagnose skin diseases, mold in houses, all of that. And they obviously managed the sacrificial system. But the catch is, their roles were strictly hereditary.
So you had to be born into it.
Yes. If you could not legally prove you were a descendant of Aaron, you could not serve at the altar, period.
Wow.
In fact, historical commentators note that those returning exiles who couldn't find their names in the family registers were deemed polluted.
Polluted.
Yeah, that was the legal term. They were legally barred from the priesthood.
Oh.
So this list of names we're looking at, it was basically the deed to the land and the professional licensing board rolled into one document.
That is wild.
If the register was lost, the entire societal structure just collapsed.
Okay, so it's the ultimate practical document. It's literally how the society functions. But I have to imagine there's like a psychological layer to this as well, right?
A massive one.
Because when your entire nation is decimated by a foreign superpower like Babylon, the natural conclusion in the ancient world was that your God was either too weak to protect you or that he had completely abandoned you.
And that right there is the theological genius of what the chronicler is doing here.
How so?
Well, by tracing their lineage all the way back to Adam and then methodically down to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the author is making this fiercely defiant claim against the empire that conquered them.
Oh, I love that. Defiance through names.
Exactly. He's essentially saying the timeline is not broken.
Wow.
The exile in Babylon, as horrific as it was just one painful chapter in a much larger narrative.
The story isn't over.
Right. The overarching story of the covenant is still perfectly intact. By naming every single generation, they are actively writing themselves back into existence. They're rejecting the empire's attempt to erase them.
Man, that is powerful. But it's where this ancient text starts to clash so violently with how we think today.
Oh, 100%.
Because we live in this hyper-individualistic modern culture, right? We love the myth of the self-made person.
We do. We worship it.
We celebrate this idea of cutting ties, moving across the country, just deleting our past and reinventing ourselves from absolute scratch.
Yeah, the clean slate.
The clean slate. But this ancient text is essentially looking us right in the eye and insisting, you do not exist in a vacuum. You are part of a continuous line.
And people hate that.
I think a lot of people really resist that. We don't like the idea that our identity is inherently tied to people we've never even met, or to histories we had zero control over.
It is a massive cultural friction point.
Yeah.
Modern individualism essentially preaches that history is just irrelevant baggage.
Right.
And that true freedom is found in being completely untethered from any overarching narrative or, familial obligation.
But is it actually freedom?
Well, look at the psychological reality we're seeing today. The rampant anxiety, the profound crisis of meaning. It suggests that complete untetheredness doesn't actually lead to freedom.
It leads to isolation.
Exactly. Profound isolation. The enduring wisdom hidden in these genealogies is that acknowledging your place in a larger ongoing story provides an anchor.
An anchor. I like that.
Now, we have to apply some discernment here, of course.
Right, because we aren't ancient Israelites.
No, we aren't. In the ancient world, your bloodline dictated your entire destiny, your profession, your social standing, who you could legally marry. It was all locked in.
Yeah, we definitely do not have to accept that rigid, ancient social stratification.
Definitely not. Yeah. But we can extract the deeper psychological truth from it.
Which is?
That recognizing the trajectory of where you come from gives you a stable foundation to build upon.
But okay, let me push back on that for a second. Doesn't looking backward run the risk of trapping us?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, so many people have family histories that are incredibly painful or toxic or just filled with failure, you know?
Lots of trauma.
Yeah. If we tie our identity too closely to our lineage, it feels like we might be dooming ourselves to repeat those exact same generational mistakes.
That is such a valid concern. But the fascinating thing is, the chronicler actually anticipates that exact fear.
Really? How?
The text addresses it directly by refusing to sanitize the history.
Oh, it doesn't hide the ugly stuff.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The goal of looking backward in this text isn't to be imprisoned by the past. It's to understand the raw materials you've been handed.
The raw materials?
Yeah. As classic commentators point out, acknowledging the sheer volume of humanity that has walked this earth before us gives us vital perspective on our own fleeting moment in time.
It grounds us.
It does. It allows us to look at our origins and say, okay, this is the reality I inherited. Now, what am I going to do with it?
It makes you wonder about your own roots. And not just your biological parents or grandparents.
Right, it's broader than that.
Yeah, like who are your intellectual ancestors? Who are your spiritual ancestors?
The people who shaped your mind.
Exactly. The mentors, the authors, the leaders who built the architecture of your worldview. Because when your world feels like it has burned down, whether that's a failed business or a shattered relationship or a completely derailed career, knowing the lineage of resilience you belong to might literally be the only way to find your footing in the ashes.
That's incredibly true. And that search for resilience requires absolute honesty about the past.
Because it's not all pretty.
Oh, it's incredibly messy. When you start paying close attention to the specific individuals the chronicler chooses to highlight in this massive family tree, you realize very quickly that this is not a PR-approved, scrubbed clean list of heroes.
It's not a highlight reel.
No. It is shockingly messy.
Oh, it is completely scandalous. I mean, the genealogies map out the 12 sons of Jacob, but the author spends a disproportionate amount of time diving deep into the weeds of two specific tribes.
Reuben in chapter 5 and Judah in chapter 2.
Yes, and the political and familial mechanics happening between these two lines are fascinating. Let's look at Reuben first.
Let's do it.
So, biologically, Reuben was the firstborn son. And in any ancient Near Eastern society, that means he automatically gets the ultimate inheritance, right?
A birthright, yes.
And what does that actually mean practically?
Well, the ancient Israelite birthright carried two very specific, massive privileges. First, there was the material blessing, which was a double portion of the family's inheritance.
So double the land, double the wealth.
Exactly. And second, the dominion, which was the political and spiritual leadership of the family moving forward.
So the firstborn was the VIP.
The firstborn was supposed to be the anchor of the next generation. But the text in chapter 5 explicitly states that Reuben lost this birthright.
He just lost.
He forfeited it. And the text doesn't hide the reason. It explicitly says he defiled his father's bed.
Oof.
Yeah. He committed a grievous, boundary-shattering moral failure by sleeping with his father's concubine.
That is just, yeah, that's bad.
It's a huge scandal. And as a direct consequence, the birthright was fractured. It was completely reassigned.
How was it divided?
Well, the material blessing, the double portion of land and wealth, went to the sons of Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh. But the dominion, the royal leadership, the role of chief ruler, that was reassigned to the tribe of Judah.
Okay, so Judah gets the dominion, the royal line.
Right.
This is the tribe that will eventually produce King David, King Solomon, and ultimately, from a theological perspective, the Messiah.
Exactly. This is the big one.
So logically, if you are an ancient scribe and you're trying to legitimize this royal bloodline, you would make sure Judah's family tree looks pristine.
You'd think so.
You would want it to read like a roster of absolute saints. But the text does the exact opposite.
It really does.
It goes out of its way to air out the absolute worst, most embarrassing moments in Judah's family history.
It actively highlights the blemishes. I mean, the text specifically names her Judah's firstborn son.
Yeah.
And notes that he was so wicked, the Lord slew him.
Just right there in the official record.
Just right there. It doesn't gloss over his existence. It permanently records his wickedness. And then it points to Tamar.
Oh, Tamar's story is intense.
It's one of the most morally complex and desperate narratives in the ancient texts. She basically has to resort to deception and an incestuous encounter with Judah himself just to force him to honor the family line.
Yeah, that is a deeply messy, highly controversial origin story for the tribe's primary lineage.
To say the least. And then you jump generations forward, and the genealogy stops to specifically point out a man named Achan.
Okay, Achan.
But it doesn't just list his name. It brands him for all of history, literally calling him Achar, the troubler of Israel, who transgressed the thing accursed.
Right. Achan was the guy who, during the conquest of Canaan, greedily stole forbidden plunder from Jericho. He hid it in his tent.
Under his floorboards.
Yeah, and he ended up causing a devastating military defeat where dozens of Israelite soldiers were slaughtered because of his hidden sin.
He's a national traitor.
He was. So why in the world would a nation, currently trying to rebuild its self-esteem after a brutal exile, immortalize a national traitor, a wicked son, and an incestuous origin story in their official royal record?
It makes no sense from a PR standpoint.
None. If I'm writing a resume for a job, I am definitely not putting down the time I embezzled company funds or got fired for gross misconduct.
That's right. You hide that stuff. But the reason it's there is because this text is operating on a completely different framework than a human resume.
What's the framework?
It is exploring the mechanics of divine grace versus generational fatalism.
Generational fatalism. Tell me more about that.
Well, almost every human culture wrestles with the concept of inherited baggage.
Sure. Generational trauma is a huge topic right now.
Exactly. And some traditions frame this as karma, the inescapable cumulative weight of past actions dictating your current reality.
So if your ancestors messed up, you pay the price.
Right. If your ancestors were corrupt, the soil of your family tree is fundamentally tainted, and you are trapped by that toxicity. But the Hebrew chronicler is introducing a radical counter-narrative here. By actively recording Echar the Troubler and the Wicked right in the middle of the royal bloodline, the author is insisting that generational brokenness does not disqualify a family from being used for profound purpose.
Oh, wow. It reminds me of the Japanese art of kintsugi.
Oh, I love that connection.
Right. When a valuable piece of pottery breaks, they don't throw it away, and they don't try to glue it back together invisibly to hide the damage.
They highlight it.
They repair the cracks using lacquer mixed with powdered gold.
The gold fills the cracks.
Exactly. And the philosophy is that the breakage and the repair are part of the object's history. The flaws aren't something to disguise. They actually become the most beautiful, illuminating part of the piece.
That's a perfect analogy.
This genealogy is literally literary kintsugi. The royal line of David isn't a pristine, unbroken vase. It's shattered pottery put back together with grace. The glory of the kingdom is built directly on top of the cracks left by Tamar, and Achan.
That is the precise mechanism at work here. The gold is the overarching providence holding the broken pieces together. And you have to think about the returning exiles reading this in 400 BC. For them, this was a lifeline.
Because they knew they were broken.
They were acutely, painfully aware of their own recent national sins. The idolatry, the corruption, the massive failures that led Babylon to their gates in the first place.
They probably felt totally disqualified.
Exactly. If perfection was the prerequisite for purpose, they were completely doomed. By showing that the greatest king in their history came from a deeply flawed line, the text reassures them that their current brokenness does not mean they are discarded.
Think about how liberating that is for us today, you know?
It's incredibly relevant.
Because we all have cracks in our history. We all have things in our family tree or in our own past that we consider massive blemishes.
Absolutely.
Maybe it's a history of addiction or a pattern of toxic relationships. Maybe it's a catastrophic financial ruin or just a legacy of really bad choices. And we expend so much energy trying to hide those things.
We bury them.
We bury them. But what if those exact imperfections are the necessary foundation for whatever resilience or empathy you are building right now?
That's the gold in the cracks.
Yeah. Acknowledging the cracks without shame is the first step to filling them with gold.
And, this theme of confronting and overcoming the circumstances of your birth, it actually leads us into some of the most fascinating anomalies hidden in these chapters.
Outliers.
Yes, because every now and then, the chronicler will completely halt the relentless rhythmic machinery of this person begat that person.
Which goes on forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
But he'll halt it to zoom in with a microscope on one specific individual who defied every expectation placed upon them.
Okay, yes, let's look at two specific, incredible outliers. The first is Jabez in chapter 4, and the second is an Egyptian servant named Jarha in chapter 2.
Two great examples.
Jabez is just amazing because he is dropped into the text out of nowhere. The narrative flow is just interrupted, and we read about this man whose mother named him Jabez, which sounds like the Hebrew word for sorrow or pain.
Yeah.
And the text tells us she gave him this name because she bore him with immense sorrow.
Now we have to pause here and understand the sheer weight of a name in ancient Near Eastern culture.
It's not like today where we just pick a name because it sounds cool.
Not at all. Naming wasn't about aesthetics. It was nomen est omen. The name is the destiny. A name was considered a prophecy of the child's character and their future trajectory.
So naming your kid Pain is dark.
To be named Pain is to have your own mother and subsequently your entire community declare that your existence is a burden, that your presence brings sorrow and your future is just bleak.
Wow.
It is the ultimate heavy label placed on a human life before they even have a chance to speak.
But the thing is, Jabez doesn't just passively accept this prophecy. He doesn't just say, well, guess I'm Pain.
No, he fights it.
He actively rebels against it through this incredibly audacious prayer.
It really is audacious.
He calls on the God of Israel and says, "Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my coast, and keep me from evil, that it may not grieve me, or, depending on the translation, that I may not cause pain."
He plays on the pun of his own name.
Exactly. He takes the root meaning of his own name, pain, and explicitly asks God to reverse the mechanism of his destiny.
It's brilliant.
And the text just simply, quietly concludes, "And God granted him that which he requested." He ends up being remembered as more honorable than his brethren.
The mechanism of what Jabez does here is profound.
Oh.
Because think about it, in a genealogical record that seems entirely deterministic, where who your father is dictates exactly who you are and what land you get.
Right, it's all locked in.
Jabez proves that individual agency still exists.
Yes.
He doesn't deny the pain of his origins. He acknowledges his starting point, but he absolutely refuses to let it become his perimeter.
He asks for his borders to be enlarged.
He prays for his coast, his borders, his influence, his reality, to be enlarged beyond the narrow confines of the trauma he was born into.
And it worked?
It did. The historical traditions surrounding Jabez are actually quite rich. Later Jewish commentaries suggest he became an eminent scholar, a leader who founded an entire city of scribes.
Oh, wait, really? From a guy named Paine?
Yeah. He literally took a life branded as sorrow and transformed it into a legacy of intellect and wisdom.
He completely rewrote his given label.
He did.
And then, a few chapters earlier in chapter 2, we see a different kind of label being rewritten, this time involving an outsider.
Right, Jerha.
There is a man in the lineage named Sheshan, and the text notes a major crisis. Sheshan had no sons, only daughters.
Now, in our modern context, that's fine. But in an agrarian, patriarchal society where land, wealth, and the continuation of the family name are passed exclusively through male heirs,
it's a disaster.
Having no sons isn't just a personal disappointment, it is a structural crisis. It means the ancestral land will likely be absorbed by other families, and Sheshan's specific lineage will be completely erased from the tribal map.
It is an existential threat to his legacy. But Sheshan has a servant, an Egyptian man named Jarha. And the text tells us that Sheshan gives his daughter in marriage to Jarha.
This is a staggering detail to include.
It really is.
Sheshan elevates a servant, a foreigner, from the very empire that once enslaved the Israelites, remember, and grafts him into the royal tribe of Judah.
He makes him family.
And not just honorary family. The child born of this union, Attai, is counted as a full, legitimate heir. The genealogy seamlessly continues through him as if he were a pure-blooded Israelite from birth.
Okay, this blew my mind when I realized the context, because the entire overarching purpose of this document is to prove pure Israelite heritage, right?
To get their land back.
Exactly. So these returning exiles can reclaim their land and validate their priests. Bloodlines are the literal currency of this era.
So why include this?
Yeah. Why would the compiler go out of their way to highlight an Egyptian servant being grafted into the royal line? What does that reveal about the true internal mechanics of this community?
Well, it reveals that beneath the rigid exterior of biological tribalism, there was actually a deeply subversive theology of merit and character.
Interesting.
By highlighting Jarha, the chronicler is reminding a fractured, fragile nation that their community has never actually been an exclusive, closed genetic loop.
There's always been a way in.
There has always been a mechanism for the outsider to be grafted in, provided they show loyalty and commit to the family and the covenant.
Merit over blood.
Exactly. Sheshan evaluates Jarha not on his pedigree, not on his ethnic background, but on his actual worth and character. He recognizes the man's merit and essentially says, your loyalty makes you a son.
It is a profound rejection of toxic, exclusionary tribalism.
It really is.
And it completely flips the script on how we evaluate people, both then and now, because we still deal with these exact same mechanisms today.
We absolutely do.
We deal with the internal label society or our families place on us, like Jabez. We internalize being called the underachiever, the anxious one, the difficult child, or the failure.
We let those names define our borders.
We do. And we also deal with society's obsession with external pedigree, like Jarha. We constantly judge people by where they went to school, what neighborhood they grew up in, or who their parents are.
But Jabez provides the blueprint for internal defiance. A label is just an external attempt to define your internal reality.
You don't have to accept it.
You don't. You have the agency to articulate a vision for your life that directly contradicts the limiting label you were handed. You can ask for your borders to be enlarged.
Yes.
And Jarha provides the blueprint for societal grace. It challenges us to look past the superficial credentials and recognize loyalty, character, and actual capability.
It makes you stop and think about the labels you've allowed to define your perimeter. What is the name your past or your insecurities have assigned to you?
That's a great question to ask yourself.
And what would it look like to craft a specific, audacious intention right now to break that label and expand your borders?
I love that.
And, speaking of the unpredictable nature of these family lines, there is a story tucked away in chapter 7 that just stops you in your tracks.
Ah, Ephraim.
Yes. We have talked about individuals rewriting their destiny, but what happens when an entire family is hit with a catastrophic, senseless tragedy?
It's a completely different dynamic.
It really brings us to the tribe of Ephraim. Set this one up for us.
So Ephraim was one of the 2 sons of Joseph, born back in Egypt. The lineage is moving along. It's pretty standard. And then the text, briefly, almost clinically, describes a devastating event.
Okay.
A group of Ephraim's sons, and based on the timeline, commentators suggest these might actually be grandsons or great-grandsons.
A younger generation?
Right. They went down to the Philistine city of Gath.
Yeah.
And the text states they went to take away their cattle, and as a result, the men of Gath slaughtered them.
It's a massacre, just a sudden, violent end to a whole generation of young men.
It is. Now, the Hebrew text here has a fascinating ambiguity that commentators have debated for centuries.
Ah, what kind of ambiguity?
Well, were the Ephraimites the aggressors? Were they acting as greedy, rash raiders, leaving their territory to steal Philistine livestock, only to be ambushed and killed by the locals defending their property?
So they were basically cattle rustlers who got caught.
That's one interpretation. Or, conversely, did the men of Gath come up into Ephraimite territory to steal their cattle, and these young men died valiantly defending their herds?
Oh, wow. So they could be heroes or villains.
Exactly. The grammatical structure allows for both interpretations. But regardless of who initiated the raid, the mechanism of the tragedy remains the exact same.
Which is?
Young men engaging in a brutal territorial clash over resources, resulting in a catastrophic loss of life. It's a plant violently nipped in the bud.
And what makes it so incredibly raw is the very next verse.
The mourning verse.
Yeah, in the middle of this dry, ancient ledger, we get this sudden, vivid window into agonizing, very human grief.
It's heartbreaking.
It simply says, Ephraim, their father, mourned many days, and his brethren came to comfort him. You can almost feel the heavy silence in that house. You can picture this older patriarch sitting in the ashes of his family's future, having outlived his own children, which is the ultimate nightmare for any parent.
It really is.
And you see the extended family traveling to just sit with him in that dark space. It's devastatingly real.
It completely shatters the illusion that these names are just data points on a spreadsheet.
Right. They aren't just names.
These were real human beings navigating profound trauma.
But the psychological depth of the text is really found in what happens next.
How they survive it.
Exactly. How does a family actually survive an event that wipes out a generation? The text notes that eventually Ephraim goes into his wife, she conceives, and bears another son.
So the line continues.
The family line continues. But the trauma has permanently altered their psychological landscape.
The name he chooses.
Ephraim names this new child Beriah. The root of the name sounds like the Hebrew phrase for in trouble or misfortune, and Ephraim explicitly says he chose it because it went evil with his house. He is literally naming the child after the tragedy.
Yes.
It's as if he's saying, yes, we are breathing, yes, we have a new child, but we are not going to paste a fake smile on this and pretend the massacre didn't happen. The pain is part of our identity now.
Exactly. He doesn't name the boy Joy or Lucky.
No. He names him Misfortune.
Because grief of that magnitude is transformative. It leaves a permanent scar. The birth of Beriah doesn't erase the slaughter in Gath. But, and this is the vital mechanism of resilience, the family pushes forward, carrying the scar tissue with them.
And this is where the narrative payoff is just absolutely brilliant.
Really?
Because the text tracks the descendants of this child named Misfortune. It goes down a few generations, and suddenly it highlights a woman in the lineage.
Shara.
A descendant named Shara, and it specifically credits her with an astonishing achievement. She builds 3 cities, including Upper and Lower Beth Horon.
Think about the arc of that.
It's incredible. You have a family absolutely decimated by a rash, violent, chaotic act. They are reduced to sitting in the dust, mourning, and carrying the name of misfortune.
Barely surviving.
Barely surviving. But you fast forward a few generations, and a woman from that exact same traumatized bloodline rises up and becomes a master architect and builder.
She establishes infrastructure?
She builds walled cities that provide enduring stability and safety for thousands of people.
It is a masterclass on the generational life cycle of trauma and recovery.
It really is.
The rashness of youth creates chaos and destruction. The older generation is forced to process the profound grief. The immediate next generation carries the heavy, named burden of the pain.
Little Bariah.
Right. But eventually, the capacity to create, to structure, and to build returns to the family line. Shera represents the ultimate triumph over the chaos of Gath.
It proves that devastating setbacks, even those caused by our own foolishness or the foolishness of those we love, do not have to be the final word on a family's legacy.
Exactly. The final word can be building something new.
That dynamic is so incredibly relevant because we all experience devastating setbacks.
Everyone does.
Sometimes they are random tragedies, and sometimes they are disasters of our own making, like a reckless raid for cattle. When you look at the landscape of your own life or your own family, how do you handle the mourning phase?
Do you let people in?
Right. Do you allow the brethren to sit with you in the pain, or do you try to rush past it? And more importantly, who is the Shera in your story?
Who is the builder?
Who is the person who took the chaotic misfortune of the past and started methodically building a structure of stability? Or maybe, right now, you are being called to be the Shera for your own family line.
To stop mourning the cattle.
Yes, to be the one who finally stops mourning the lost cattle and starts laying the bricks for a new city.
That is a profound way to apply the text. And it's fascinating because while Ephraim's story shows us how a family navigates the depths of tragedy, the chronicler is equally concerned with how we navigate the exact opposite problem.
Oh, the Transjordan tribes.
Yes. The text contains a stark warning about the profound, hidden dangers of massive success.
Let's talk about chapter 5 and the Transjordan tribes.
Right. So this is the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Geography is really important here.
Okay, where are they?
They didn't settle in the main part of Israel. They chose to live on the eastern frontier across the Jordan River.
Out in the Wild East.
Exactly. And the text tells us they raised this massive, highly disciplined army. It specifically numbers them at 44,760 valiant men.
That is a huge army for the ancient world.
Massive. Experts with the shield, sword, and bow. And they enter into a massive conflict with a coalition of nomadic tribes called the Hagrids.
And they win.
Oh, they don't just win. They win an absolutely overwhelming victory.
And the text is explicit about how they won, right? It wasn't just tactics.
No, it wasn't just superior military tactics. The chronicler writes, they cried to God in the battle, and he was entreated of them because they put their trust in him.
So they depended on God.
It was a victory forged in desperation and faith. In the heat of the conflict, when they were on the brink of death, they relied entirely on their core spiritual values.
And because of this, they acquire a staggering amount of wealth.
The plunder is unbelievable.
The plunder listed is astronomical. 50,000 camels, 250,000 sheep, 2,000 donkeys.
It's an economic explosion.
They conquer the enemy's territory and settle into this wide, peaceful, incredibly prosperous land. I mean, by every metric of the ancient world, they have made it.
They're the 1%.
They have achieved absolute security and unparalleled economic success. They hit the jackpot.
They really did. But then, almost immediately after describing this glorious triumph, the chronicler just drops the hammer.
The very next verses
describe their complete downfall. The text says they transgressed against the God of their fathers and went a-whoring after the gods of the people of the land.
They just abandoned everything.
They completely abandoned the spiritual foundation that gave them the victory in the first place.
And what happens?
As a direct result, God stirs up the king of Assyria, and these wealthy, powerful frontier tribes are the very first ones to be conquered, stripped of everything, and dragged away into captivity.
It is a brilliant, terrifying psychological arc.
It really is. And the historical context is key here, because these tribes originally asked to settle on the eastern frontier because the land was ideal for their massive herds of livestock.
So it was an economic decision from the start.
Exactly. They prioritized economic expansion over geographic proximity to the spiritual center of the nation in Jerusalem.
Which set them up for failure.
Right. When they were backed into a corner in a life-or-death battle, their desperation drove them to rely on God. But once the battle was won,
once they were comfortable,
once they achieved unprecedented comfort, wealth, and wide pastures, They assimilated.
They just blended in.
The mechanics of ancient assimilation usually meant adopting the local deities who were believed to control the agricultural cycles and the weather. They traded their ancestral covenant for the local gods of prosperity.
They suffered from acute moral amnesia.
Moral amnesia, that's a perfect term for it.
I kept thinking about a modern parallel for this, and it is the classic startup curse.
Oh, explain that.
Think about a small group of founders working out of a cramped garage. They have no funding, they are sleeping under their desks, and they are trying to survive against massive established competitors.
High stress, high stakes.
Extremely high stakes. In that environment of severe adversity, they rely entirely on their core vision, their grit, and their shared values. The struggle units them and keeps them focused.
Right.
But then they win. They secure massive Series C funding, they go public, and suddenly they move into a sprawling Silicon Valley campus with kombucha on tap and nap pods.
What happens to the culture?
It completely evaporates. The moment they achieve massive comfort, they lose their edge.
They assimilate.
They assimilate into standard, bloated corporate culture. They forget the scrappy, principled values that built the company in the first place. They lose their soul. And eventually they get hostily taken over by a larger conglomerate.
The comfort destroyed what the adversity couldn't.
Exactly. That is the exact dynamic the Transjordan tribes experienced. It exposes this deeply counterintuitive truth about human psychology. Success and comfort often pose a far greater threat to our core values than adversity does.
That is so true. Adversity, like a battle with the Hagrites or a garage startup phase, forces you to strip away the non-essentials and rely on your bedrock principles.
It focuses you.
It drives you to your foundation. But success creates a dangerous illusion of self-sufficiency.
You think you did it all yourself.
Right. When the bank account is full, when the pastures are quiet, it is incredibly easy to start worshiping the gods of the people of the land, which, in our modern context, look like materialism, status, ego, and complacency.
They won the war but lost their identity in the peace that followed.
It is such a chilling warning because it is so easy to read these ancient texts and judge these people for bowing down to literal wooden idols.
Like, how could you be so dumb?
Exactly. But we do the exact same thing when the pressure is off.
We really do. We work incredibly hard, applying strict discipline and humility to get out of debt or to fix a marriage or to earn a promotion.
Right.
But the moment we achieve the goal, the moment things are going well, we abandon the discipline.
We get lazy.
We become arrogant. We forget the principles that got us to the top, and we just absorb the toxic values of whatever new environment we find ourselves in.
That is exactly why the chronicler includes this story. It is a warning to the returning exiles who, remember, are hoping to eventually achieve prosperity again.
Right. They want their wealth back.
He's warning them that if they abandon their internal compass, the moment the external pressure is relieved, they will inevitably lose everything all over again.
It forces us to ask ourselves, where in your own life has success or comfort caused you to forget the principles that built you?
That's a tough question.
When the battle is won, how do you prevent moral amnesia? How do you anchor yourself so you don't drift away when the wind is finally at your back?
So how do you prevent that drift? How does a society maintain its soul and its memory?
Well, it seems like the chronicler's answer is found in the final massive section of these genealogies.
Yes, chapters 6 and 9.
After covering the warriors, the tragedies, and the kings, chapters 6 and 9 shift to a hyper-obsessive focus on the tribe of Levi the temple workers.
To understand why the chronicler spends so much parchment on the Levites, we have to understand the function of the ancient temple.
Because it's not a church.
Right. Modern readers often equate the temple with a local church or synagogue, a place you go for a few hours a week for a spiritual service.
Just on Sunday mornings.
Exactly. But in ancient Israel, the temple was the macro engine of their entire civilization.
It was everything.
It was the national bank, the Supreme Court, the central butchery, the primary bakery, and the literal intersection of heaven and earth.
That is a lot of operations.
It required a massive, highly organized labor force to keep this ecosystem functioning.
And the text does not give us a brief, sweeping overview of this labor force. It dives into incredibly specific, almost tedious job descriptions.
Very specific.
We get the lineage of the high priests, sure. But we also read about Heman, Asaph, and Ethan, the master musicians who were appointed over the service of song.
The worship leaders.
We read about the 212 gatekeepers, or porters, who guarded the entrances. We read about the specific Levites in charge of the inventory, the fine flour, the wine, the oil, the frankincense.
The quartermasters.
Yeah. We even get the name of a guy named Mattathiah, whose entire official job description, preserved for all of eternity, was that he had the set office over the things that were made in the pans.
He was the baker.
He was the chief baker for the sacred showbread.
The level of detail here is so intentional, and it's deeply theological. The chronicler repeatedly emphasizes the systemic order of it all, using phrases like, everyone knew his charge, or noting that they were in their set office.
Everything had its place.
These blueprints had been established generations earlier by King David and the prophet Samuel. It was an ecosystem where every single role was vital to the integrity of the whole. Take the gatekeepers, for example. We hear porter, and we think of a bellhop at a hotel. But these 212 men were highly trained security forces and theological discerners.
Oh, wow.
They had to guard the thresholds, prevent anything ritually impure from entering the sanctuary, and protect the immense wealth stored in the temple treasuries.
That's a huge responsibility.
And the text notes that those in charge of the sacred vessels had to count them by tale, meaning one by one, every single time they were brought in or taken out. It was a system of profound accountability and precision.
But let's be honest about human nature for a second.
Okay.
It is very easy to romanticize the role of the lead singer. Everybody wants to be Asaph, writing the hit psalms, standing in the center of the choir, performing the spectacular music day and night.
Everyone wants to be the front man.
Exactly. But what about the guy whose entire legacy is just he counted the bowls? Or Mattathiah, the guy whose only claim to fame is he baked the bread in the pans?
That doesn't sound as glorious.
How do we find meaning in that? Because for most of us listening, our daily lives look a lot more like counting inventory and baking bread than singing light vocals on a grand stage.
And that is exactly why the chronicler elevates them. The ancient mindset viewed the temple as a microcosm of the ordered universe.
A microcosm.
If the universe is to function, every element must faithfully execute its specific design. The chronicler does not view Mattathiah the baker as functionally inferior to Asaph the lead singer.
They're on the same level.
They're both listed as equally essential components of the sacred ecosystem. The mechanism here is the dignity of all work.
The dignity of work.
Without the gatekeepers, the temple is vulnerable and defiled. Without the accountant counting the vessels by tale, the system is corrupted by theft. Without the baker, there is no sacred offering to place on the table. In the grand machinery of society, the mundane tasks are the load-bearing walls.
It is the absolute antidote to our modern cultural obsession with main character syndrome.
Yes, absolutely.
We are constantly bombarded with the message that if you are not the CEO, if you are not the visionary founder, if you are not the influencer with the massive audience, your life is somehow insignificant.
We view ordinary work as a failure.
We view mundane work as a failure to achieve greatness. But this text argues the exact opposite. It says the person who guards the door, the person who tracks the spreadsheets, the person who makes the meals, they are doing holy work.
They are holding it all together.
They are the ones actually keeping the sanctuary of society from collapsing into chaos.
Precisely. Remember the audience standing in the ashes of Jerusalem in 400 BC. They are looking at literal ruins. They have to rebuild the physical walls, the houses, and the temple.
They have a lot of work to do.
They cannot all be the visionary leaders like Nehemiah or the Olympic scholars like Ezra. They desperately need stonemasons. They need people willing to haul away the charred rubble. They need administrators to meticulously count the limited supplies.
They need bakers and counters.
By permanently recording the specific mundane tasks of the temple bakers and bowl counters in the official sacred genealogy, the author is validating the daily grind of the ordinary citizen.
He's saying, I see you.
He is communicating to them, your quiet, repetitive, unglamorous labor is seen. It is recorded, and it is absolutely essential to our survival and our worship.
That reframes everything. Think about the most repetitive, unglamorous task in your daily routine. Maybe it's doing the laundry for the 5th time this week.
Or doing the dishes.
Maybe it's inputting mindless data into a spreadsheet, or driving your kids to practice, or literally just counting the inventory at your retail job. It is so easy to view those tasks as soul-crushing chores.
It really is.
But what happens when you reframe that work? What happens when you view that specific task not as a burden, but as your vital, trusted contribution to the sanctuary of your family, your business, or your community?
It changes your whole posture.
If Mattathiah could find a wholly recorded purpose in the baking pans, we can absolutely find it in our daily routines.
It shifts your entire psychological posture from drudgery to dignity.
Yes.
When you realize that the peace and stability of your environment rely directly on your faithful execution of those small tasks. You stop looking for the spotlight and you start taking pride in the execution.
You own it.
You realize that you are a crucial load-bearing link in the continuous line of human endeavor, just like the names preserved in these chapters.
And that really brings us full circle on our journey through this fireproof box.
It does. We've covered a lot of ground.
We opened up what looked like 9 chapters of a tedious ancient phone book.
A wall of names.
But by digging into the mechanics of these genealogies, we found a vibrant, raw tapestry of the human experience.
We saw the kintsugi.
We saw the grace that takes the cracked, flawed bricks of Judah's line people like Tamar and Achan and builds a kingdom on top of them.
Yeah.
We watched Jebez actively rewrite the painful destiny assigned to his name, and we saw Sheshan recognize the merit of an Egyptian servant over strict pedigree.
We sat with Ephraim in his grief.
We sat in the heavy silence with Ephraim, and we watched his descendant Sherah rise from the ashes to build cities. We saw the Transjordan tribes win the war but lose their soul to the comfort of success. And we found profound, lasting dignity in the baker's pan.
It is a remarkable testament to the continuity of human nature.
It really is.
I mean, the geopolitical empires have changed, the technology is unrecognizable, but the internal mechanisms of humanity, the fears, the failures, the grief, the ambition, and the capacity for redemption, they are exactly the same today as they were thousands of years ago.
Exactly the same.
These genealogies aren't just lists of dead ancestors. They are highly compressed stories of human survival.
Which leaves us with one final thought to ponder as we wrap up. Every single name we discussed today, and the thousands of names we skipped over in those 9 chapters, represents a full, vivid, complex human life.
Every single one.
Every one of those names represents someone who fell in love, who had deep anxieties, who fought battles, who suffered profound loss, and who woke up to quiet, ordinary mornings. Their entire existence, all their striving and failing, has been distilled down to a single name, and occasionally, if they were notable, one short descriptive sentence.
Yeah.
So if a historian 2,500 years from now were to dig through the digital ashes of our civilization, and they were to write a genealogy of your community, and your name appeared in that record with just one short descriptive sentence next to it,
What would it say?
what would you want that sentence to be?
That is the ultimate question of legacy. It strips away all the noise and forces us to clarify what truly matters in the brief time we are given.
That's the heart of this section. This is wisdom for the present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.